I found the box of letters on my kitchen table when I came in from the garden. Not where I kept them. Not in the study closet behind the winter coats and the boxes of tax returns. Here, in the open, under the afternoon light that came through the window above the sink. The lid was off. 3 envelopes sat beside it, creased and reopened. I recognized my own handwriting on the dates. The most recent one was from last Sunday. My son was standing by the counter with his back to me. His shoulders were tight, the way they got when he was building toward something. He did not turn when I came in. He was holding another envelope, one I had not sealed yet. I had written it that morning. He said, "Dad, we need to talk." I set my gloves on the table beside the box. My hands smelled like soil and the roots of the tomato plants I had been staking. I did not sit down. I waited. He turned. His face had the look it got when he thought he was being kind, which usually meant he was about to say something that served him more than me. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. I did not answer immediately. I moved to the sink and washed my hands. The water was cold. I dried them on the towel hanging from the oven door. Then I looked at him. 20 years, I said. Since the week after your mother died. He closed his eyes briefly, the way people do when they are gathering patience they do not actually feel. "Dad," he said, "this isn't healthy." I had been hearing versions of that sentence for 2 decades. First from his older sister, who visited less and less until she stopped visiting at all. Then from a grief counselor his sister had paid for, a woman with soft eyes and softer questions who seemed disappointed when I did not weep in her office. Then from neighbors, from people at church, from his wife, who once told me at Thanksgiving that I was making everyone uncomfortable. I had learned not to argue. I simply continued. "They're letters," I said. "I'm not bothering anyone." "You're bothering yourself," he said. He put the envelope down and came closer. "You're stuck. You've been stuck for 20 years. Mom is gone. You have to move on." Move on. As if grief were a location. As if I were blocking traffic. I looked past him to the box. Inside were more than 1,000 letters. 1 for every week. Sometimes 2 if the week had been difficult. I wrote them Saturday mornings after breakfast, before the day accumulated noise. I wrote about what I had planted, what I had cooked, what I had read. I wrote about memory, about her voice, about the way she used to hum while folding laundry, a habit I did not notice until she was gone, and the silence in the house became a third presence. I wrote because it kept her real in a way that photographs could not. Photographs froze her. Letters let her live. "I'm not stuck," I said. "Then what do you call this?" He gestured at the box. "Writing to a dead woman every week for 20 years? Dad, that's not healthy. That's obsession." I felt the old sharpness in my chest, the one that came when people reduced love to pathology. I kept my voice level. "It's correspondence," I said. "It's denial," he said. "You're denying reality." I thought about that. I had spent 2 decades being accused of denial by people who seemed to think acceptance meant forgetting. I knew reality. I knew she was dead. I had held her hand when she died. I had signed the papers. I had chosen the plot. I had stood at the grave while they lowered her into the ground and felt the world tilt in a way it never corrected. I knew reality so well it sat beside me every morning while I wrote. "I'm not asking you to understand," I said, "but I am asking you to leave it alone." "I can't," he said. "Not when I see you doing this to yourself. Not when you're wasting your life writing letters no one will ever read." "I read them," I said. He stared at me. "You read your own letters?" "Sometimes," I said. "When I need to remember what I was thinking. When I need to hear her answer." His expression shifted into something closer to pity, which was worse than his frustration. "Dad," he said quietly. "She doesn't answer. She's gone." "I know that," I said. "Do you?" He picked up the box and held it between us like evidence. "Because this doesn't look like knowing. This looks like someone who can't let go. I felt the anger then, small and cold, not at him, at the assumption. That love had an expiration date, that mourning had a schedule, that after a certain point, fidelity became dysfunction. "Put the box down," I said. He did not. "I think you should stop," he said. "I think you should throw these away and start actually living." "I am living." "No," he said. "You're hiding. You're hiding in the past because you're afraid of the present, and I'm not going to watch you do it anymore." I looked at him for a long moment. He was 42. He had his mother's eyes and my stubbornness and a certainty that came from never having lost anything he could not replace. He had been 22 when she died, old enough to grieve but young enough to recover. He had moved on, as he would say. He had married. He had built a career. He had 2 children I saw 3 times a year. He had done what people do. He had continued. And he could not understand why I had not. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I want you to admit this is a problem," he said. "I want you to get help. I want you to stop living like a ghost." "I'll think about it," I said. He set the box down hard enough that the envelopes jumped. "That's what you always say, but nothing changes." "No," I said. "Nothing changes." He left 20 minutes later. I heard his car pull out of the driveway and fade down the street. I stood in the kitchen until the sound was gone. Then I picked up the box and carried it back to the study. I put it in the closet behind the winter coats. I closed the door. I sat at my desk and looked at the calendar on the wall. Saturday was 2 days away. I had been writing the letters longer than I had known my son. That thought arrived quietly, the way important thoughts often do. I had been married to his mother for 38 years. He had been alive for 42. The math was simple. He had known her as a mother. I had known her as everything. She died on a Tuesday in March. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, diagnosed 18 months before. We had done everything the doctors suggested: surgery, chemotherapy, clinical trials, prayer, though neither of us believed it worked. She died anyway, at home, in our bed, with the window open because she wanted to hear the birds. I was holding her hand. She stopped breathing between one moment and the next. No drama, no last words, just stillness. The first letter I wrote was not planned. I wrote it the Saturday after the funeral because I did not know what else to do. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a blank sheet of paper, and I started writing. I told her about the service, about the flowers, about our daughter crying in a way that made me feel helpless, about our son standing apart from everyone with his jaw tight, already building the walls that would keep him functional. I told her I did not know how to do this without her. I folded the letter and put it in an envelope and wrote the date on the front. I did not mail it. There was nowhere to send it. I put it in a shoebox in the closet. The next Saturday I wrote another one, and the Saturday after that, it became a rhythm, a structure, a way to mark time that felt less brutal than the calendar. The letters were not morbid. They were not full of weeping. They were plain. I told her about the garden, which I kept because she had planted it. I told her about the books I was reading, the meals I was cooking, the weather. I told her about the children, about their visits, about the distance that grew each year. I told her things I could not tell anyone else because no one else would have understood. After 10 years, my daughter told me I needed to stop. She said it gently, over dinner at a restaurant she had chosen because it was public, and she thought I would not argue in public. She said the letters were unhealthy. She said I was stuck in the past. She said she was worried about me. I listened. I nodded. I thanked her for her concern. I kept writing. After 15 years, my son started hinting. He would come by and make comments about how empty the house was, how quiet, how I should consider moving into something smaller, something closer to people. He never said what he meant, which was that I should stop being alone, stop grieving, stop remembering. I did not argue. I simply did not change. Now, after 20 years, he had found the letters. and he wanted me to stop. I thought about what he had said, that I was wasting my life, that no one would ever read them. The second part was true. I had not written them to be read. But the first part was wrong. I was not wasting my life. I was spending it the only way that made sense to me. In conversation with the woman I had loved for 38 years, in fidelity to a bond that death had interrupted but not ended. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed and listened to the house. It made small sounds. The refrigerator humming, the furnace clicking on and off, the floor settling. Sounds I had listened to for 40 years, first with her beside me, then alone. I thought about my son's face, the pity, the frustration, the certainty that he was right and I was broken. I got up at 3 in the morning and went to the study. I opened the closet and took out the box. I sat at my desk and pulled out the oldest letter, the first one, the one I had written the week after she died. I unfolded it. My handwriting looked younger, less steady. I read it slowly. I had forgotten some of what I had written. The details about the service, the flowers, my daughter's tears, my son's silence. I had written, "I don't know how to do this." I had written, "Everything is wrong without you." I read the next letter, and the next. I read for 2 hours, moving through the years. The letters changed as I did. The grief in the early ones was raw. Later it became something quieter. Not less, but different, integrated. The letters became less about loss and more about continuity. I told her about the tomatoes I grew from the seeds she had saved, about the quilt I finished that she had started, about the birds that came to the feeder she had hung. I told her about learning to be alone without being lonely, a distinction it took me years to understand. By 5 in the morning, I had read 2 years' worth of letters. I put them back in the box. I sat at my desk and watched the sky lighten. I thought about my son, about his need for me to change, about his conviction that my way of grieving was wrong. I understood then that this was not about the letters. This was about his discomfort. My grief reminded him of his own, which he had buried so deep he could no longer find it. My fidelity to his mother made him feel inadequate in his own marriage, which was functional but not transcendent. My refusal to move on was a mirror he did not want to look into. I did not blame him, but I would not change. Saturday came. I woke early and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. I wrote the date at the top. I started writing. I told her about the conversation with our son. I told her about his face, his frustration, his certainty. I told her I understood his discomfort, but I could not cure it. I told her the letters had never been for him or for anyone else. They were for me. They were the way I kept her real in a world that wanted to erase her. They were my refusal to let death have the final word. I wrote for an hour. When I finished, I folded the letter and put it in an envelope. I wrote the date on the front. I added it to the box. My son called that afternoon. I did not answer. He called again on Sunday. I let it go to voicemail. He did not leave a message. On Monday, he sent a text. It said, "We need to finish our conversation." I did not reply. On Tuesday, he showed up at the house. I was in the garden. I heard his car and kept working. He came around the side of the house and stood at the edge of the raised beds. I was pulling weeds from between the tomato plants. I did not look up. "Dad," he said. I kept working. "I know you're upset," he said, "but we need to talk about this." I pulled another weed. The roots came up clean. I dropped it in the bucket beside me. "I'm worried about you," he said. I looked at him then. He was wearing his work clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt. He had come from the office. He had taken time out of his day to continue this. "I'm fine," I said. "You're not fine," he said. "This thing with the letters, it's not fine. It's not normal." "I don't care about normal," I said. He sighed. "Dad, please, I'm trying to help you." "I don't need help," I said. "Yes," he said. "You do. You just don't see it." I stood up slowly. My knees were stiff from kneeling. I wiped my hands on my jeans. I looked at him across the tomato plants, across the dirt and the stakes and the small green fruit that would ripen in another month. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to stop writing the letters," he said. "I want you to admit you have a problem. I want you to see someone, a therapist, someone who can help you work through this." "I've worked through it," I said. "By writing letters to a dead woman?" He shook his head. "That's not working through it. That's avoiding it." "I'm not avoiding anything," I said. "I'm living with it. There's a difference." "Not one I can see," he said. We stood looking at each other. I saw my wife in his face, the shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw. I saw the child he had been, the one who used to help her in this garden, digging holes for seeds and getting dirt on his knees. I saw the man he had become, the one who thought love should be tidy and grief should have an endpoint. "I'm not going to stop," I said. His expression hardened. "Then I can't keep watching you do this to yourself." "I'm not asking you to watch," I said. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means you can visit or not visit," I said. "You can call or not call, but I'm not changing. Not for you. Not for anyone." He stared at me. "You'd choose this over me?" "I'm not choosing," I said. "You are." He left without another word. I heard his car start. I heard him drive away. I went back to pulling weeds. Over the next 3 weeks, I did not hear from him. I did not call. I wrote my letters. I tended my garden. I read in the evenings and listened to music his mother had loved. I cooked meals I had learned to make because she had taught me. I lived. On a Thursday afternoon in late May, I was at the hardware store buying stakes for the beans when I saw his wife. She was in the paint aisle, studying color swatches. She looked up when I came around the corner. Her face shifted into something complicated. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything else. "Hi," she said. "Hello," I said. We stood there. She looked tired. She had 2 children under 10 and a husband who worked 60 hours a week. She was doing her best. "He told me what happened," she said. I nodded. "He's upset," she said. "I know," I said. "He thinks you're not well," she said. "He's wrong," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I don't think he is." I did not respond. "I think," she said slowly, "that you're grieving in a way he doesn't understand, and that scares him. Because if grief can last that long, if love can be that strong, then it means he's not doing enough. It means his life is smaller than yours." I had not expected that. I looked at her more carefully. "He doesn't know how to compete with a ghost," she said, "and he's angry at you for making him feel like he has to." "I'm not asking him to compete," I said. "I know," she said, "but he feels like he is anyway." We stood there in the paint aisle. Somewhere in the store a saw was cutting wood. The sound was rhythmic and precise. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. She smiled, just a little. "I think you should keep writing your letters," she said, "and I think he'll figure it out eventually. Or he won't. But either way, it's not your job to make him comfortable with your grief." She left. I bought my steaks and went home. That Saturday, I wrote my letter. I told her about the conversation with our daughter-in-law. I told her I thought maybe she was the one who understood. I told her our son was struggling with something I could not fix. I told her I missed her with a sharpness that had not dulled in 20 years, and that I was learning to be grateful for the sharpness because it meant she was still real. I folded the letter. I put it in the envelope. I wrote the date. I added it to the box. 2 days later, on a Monday evening, my son called. I answered. "Dad," he said. "Yes," I said. There was a pause. "I talked to Sarah," he said. "She told me she saw you." "She did," I said. Another pause. "She said some things that made me think." "Good," I said. "I still don't agree with what you're doing," he said. "I still think it's not healthy." "I know," I said. "But," he said, and stopped. Then he said, but maybe it's not my place to decide that. I did not say anything. I'm sorry I went through your things, he said. That was wrong. Yes, I said. He said, I just want you to be happy. I am happy, I said. Not the way you think happy should look, but in my own way. Okay, he said. He sounded uncertain. Okay. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, about his children, about work, about the weather. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet and thought about what had just happened. He had not changed his mind. He still thought I was wrong. But he had stopped trying to change me. That was something. The weeks passed. Summer came. The tomatoes ripened. The beans climbed their stakes. I picked them in the early mornings when the dew was still on the leaves and the air was cool. I cooked meals and froze what I could not eat. I gave bags of vegetables to neighbors. I read books on the back porch. I wrote my letters. My son visited in July with his family. His children ran in the garden. His wife helped me make dinner. He was polite and careful, the way people are when they are trying not to say what they think. I did not mind. We ate on the patio and watched the sun go down. His daughter, who was 8, asked me if I was lonely. Sometimes, I said. Why don't you get married again? She asked. Her father started to interrupt, but I shook my head. Because I'm already married, I said. She frowned. But Grandma is dead. Yes, I said. But I'm still married. She thought about that. That doesn't make sense, she said. It does to me, I said. She shrugged and went back to eating her corn. Her father looked at me across the table. I looked back. He did not say anything. They left after dinner. His wife hugged me at the door. Thank you, she whispered. For what? I asked. For showing them what love looks like, she said. After they left, I stood in the kitchen and looked at the dishes in the sink. I washed them slowly. I dried them and put them away. I wiped down the counters and the table. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. In the bedroom, I opened the drawer where I kept her things. A sweater she had worn, a book she had been reading, a pair of earrings. Small things I had saved because they still smelled like her, or felt like her, or reminded me of her in ways I could not name. I picked up the sweater and held it. The scent was fading. In another 10 years it would be gone. But the letters would remain, and in the letters she would stay whole. I put the sweater back. I closed the drawer. I lay down on the bed and looked at the ceiling. I thought about my son, about his need for me to be different, about his fear that my grief diminished his life. I thought about his wife, who understood what he did not. I thought about his daughter, who asked the questions adults were too careful to ask. I thought about the letters. More than 1,000 now. 20 years of conversation, 20 years of fidelity, 20 years of refusing to let death win. I would keep writing them. Until I could not. Until my hands were too stiff, or my mind was too clouded, or I was dead myself. And then someone would find them, and they would read them, and they would know. They would know that love does not end, that grief is not weakness, that fidelity is its own reward. Maybe it would be my son who found them. Maybe after I was gone, he would open the box and read the letters and understand that I had not been stuck, that I had not been wasting my life, that I had been doing the only thing that mattered. I had been loving her. Still. Always. Or maybe he would never understand. Maybe he would throw the letters away and feel relieved that I was finally free of my obsession. It did not matter. The letters were not for him. They were for me, and for her, and for the marriage that death had not ended. I fell asleep thinking about the next letter, about what I would tell her, about the visit, about his daughter's question, about the way his wife had hugged me, about the tomatoes ripening in the garden and the beans climbing their stakes, and the small, ordinary miracles of a life lived in the shadow of great love. Saturday came again. I woke early. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. I wrote the date at the top. I started writing. I told her everything.